I discovered my brother had been stealing from our family business for 3 years. On the same day, I found out my wife was pregnant with our first child. The irony wasn't lost on me. New life, shattered trust, and a choice that would define everything. Let me take you back to where it all started falling apart. My name is David, and for 15 years, I worked alongside my older brother Marcus in our family's construction company. Dad started Mitchell Brothers Construction in 1987, building it from nothing into a multimillion-dollar operation. When he retired 5 years ago, he handed the reins to both of us equally. 50-50 partners, blood brothers, best friends. Or so I thought. Marcus was always the charmer, the smooth talker who landed the big contracts. I was the numbers guy, the one who made sure projects stayed on budget and crews got paid on time. It was a perfect partnership, everyone said. The dynamic duo of the construction world in our small Ohio town. But that Tuesday morning in March changed everything. I was sitting in our cramped office above the warehouse, going through quarterly reports, when something caught my eye. A series of checks made out to M&M Consulting Services for equipment rentals. $23,000 over 6 months. The problem? I'd never heard of M&M Consulting, and I handled all our vendor relationships. My stomach dropped. That familiar feeling when you know something's wrong but you're not ready to face it yet. I started digging deeper. More checks to companies I didn't recognize. Premier Tools LLC, $447,000. Construction Solutions Incorporated, $432,000. All approved by Marcus. All for services or equipment that somehow never appeared on our job sites. The pattern was clear once I saw it. Marcus had been creating fake invoices, setting up shell companies, and systematically draining our accounts. The man I trusted with my life, my future, my family's legacy, was a thief. But here's where it gets complicated. As I sat there staring at the evidence, my phone buzzed. A text from my wife, Sarah. "Can you come home for lunch? I have something important to tell you." I knew what that meant. We'd been trying for 2 years, and Sarah had that glow, that nervous excitement in her voice lately. Today was the day she was going to tell me we were finally going to be parents. So there I was, faced with the biggest betrayal of my life and the most joyful moment of my life, happening within hours of each other. The universe has a twisted sense of timing, doesn't it? I drove home in a daze, my mind racing between rage and euphoria. How do you process that kind of emotional whiplash? Sarah was waiting in our kitchen, practically bouncing with excitement. She'd made my favorite sandwich, set out fresh flowers, and had that look in her eyes that made my heart skip even after 8 years of marriage. "I'm pregnant," she said, holding up a positive test with tears streaming down her face. I should have been the happiest man alive. Instead, I felt like I was drowning. Here was Sarah, glowing with joy, talking about nurseries and baby names, while I sat there knowing that our financial future, our baby's future, had been systematically stolen by my own brother. Couldn't tell her. Not yet. Not on what should have been the best day of our lives. So I smiled. I held her. I pretended everything was perfect while my world crumbled inside. That night, after Sarah fell asleep, I went back to the office. I needed to know how bad it really was. The deeper I dug, the sicker I felt. Over 3 years, Marcus had stolen nearly $400,000. Our emergency fund, our equipment reserves, money earmarked for employee bonuses, gone. But the worst part? He'd been doing it while looking me in the eye every single day. Asking about my plans, my dreams, Sarah's desire to start a family. Acting like the concerned big brother while systematically destroying everything Dad had built. I didn't sleep for 3 days. By Friday, I had all the evidence I needed. Bank records, forged signatures, fake invoices. Enough to send Marcus to prison for years. The question was, what did I do with it? See, here's what made this truly devastating. Marcus wasn't just stealing money. He was stealing from our employees' pension fund. From the college fund Dad had set up for future grandchildren. From the medical insurance pool that covered our workers' families. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about 23 families who depended on our company for their livelihoods. I finally confronted him on a Friday afternoon. The warehouse was empty, most of the crew had gone home early, and it was just us in the office. Like old times, except everything had changed. "We need to talk," I said, spreading the evidence across his desk. Marcus looked at the papers for a long moment. No surprise, no shock, no denial. Just resignation. "How long have you known?" he asked quietly. "Since Tuesday. The question is, how long has this been going on? And why?" He leaned back in his chair, suddenly looking older than his 43 years. 3 years, 2 months, 16 days. But who's counting, right? The casualness in his voice made my blood boil. $400,000, Marcus. Do you understand what you've done? "I understand perfectly," he said, standing up and walking to the window. "I understand that while you've been playing happy family with Sarah, planning your white picket fence life, I've been keeping this company afloat." "What are you talking about?" "The Henderson project. Remember that? The one that went $200,000 over budget because of that foundation issue." I remembered. It had nearly bankrupted us 2 years ago. "I covered it," Marcus continued. "With my own money initially. My savings, my retirement fund, even borrowed against my house. But it wasn't enough. So I improvised. You stole. I saved the company." He spun around, his face flushed with anger. "I saved your job, your future, your precious little life with Sarah. And how do you repay me? By treating me like a criminal." I stared at him, trying to process what he was saying. "Even if that's true, even if you initially used your own money, you stole $400,000 over 3 years. How does that math work?" Marcus laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Interest, David. Compound interest. I was paying myself back with interest for saving this company. For saving your future. That's not how it works, Marcus. You can't just what? Make executive decisions? I'm 50% owner of this company, same as you. I made a business decision to save us from bankruptcy, and I've been collecting what I'm owed." The twisted logic was breathtaking. In his mind, he'd transformed theft into heroism. But then he said something that changed everything. "Besides, it's not like we can't afford it. Haven't you wondered why our profits have been so steady despite the economic downturn? Haven't you questioned why we're landing contracts that companies twice our size are losing?" A chill ran down my spine. "What do you mean?" "I mean, little brother, that while you've been buried in spreadsheets, I've been making deals. Real deals. The kind that keep us competitive." "What kind of deals?" Marcus smiled, and for the first time, I saw something genuinely sinister in his expression. "The kind Dad would have made if he'd had the stomach for it." Over the next hour, Marcus laid out a network of corruption that made his embezzlement look like petty cash. Bribes to city inspectors, kickbacks to project managers, under-the-table payments to union officials. Our company hadn't been successful despite the economic downturn. We'd been successful because we'd been cheating. "Every major contract we've won in the last 5 years," Marcus said, almost proudly, "has been because I've greased the right palms. The school renovation project, the municipal building, the new hospital wing. All of it. I felt like I was going to be sick." "How much?" "In bribes? Maybe $50,000 a year. But it's generated over $2 million in additional revenue. Best return on investment we've ever seen." "Marcus, that's not just theft, it's fraud. It's conspiracy. It's business, David. Real business. The kind Dad never understood because he was too honest for his own good." I looked at my brother, really looked at him, and realized I'd never known him at all. The man I'd worked beside for 15 years, the man I'd trusted with everything, was a stranger. But the story doesn't end there. Because 3 days later, I made a choice that surprised everyone, including myself. I didn't call the police. I didn't confront the corruption. Instead, I did something that probably makes me just as bad as Marcus, depending on how you look at it. I used it. See, while Marcus had been busy playing criminal mastermind, I'd been doing my own research. And what I discovered was that our biggest competitor, Hartwell Construction, had been bidding against us on every major project for years. They'd been underbidding us consistently, winning contracts through what I assumed was better efficiency. Turns out they'd been using the exact same playbook as Marcus. Bribes, kickbacks, fraud, the whole 9 yards. The only difference was they'd been better at it. So I made a choice that still haunts me. Instead of exposing Marcus, instead of bringing down our company and destroying 23 families' livelihoods, I decided to beat Hartwell at their own game. I took Marcus's evidence, his network of contacts, his carefully cultivated relationships with corrupt officials, and I turned it into a weapon. Within 6 months, Hartwell Construction was under federal investigation. Anonymous tips, carefully leaked documents, strategic revelations that painted a picture of systematic corruption dating back a decade. The FBI, the IRS, even the state attorney general got involved. Hartwell's owner, Robert Hartwell, went to prison for 12 years. His company collapsed, their contracts were redistributed, and their employees scattered to find new jobs. Many of them came to work for us. Marcus never knew what I'd done. As far as he was concerned, I'd simply chosen to look the other way, to accept the reality of how our business actually operated. He thought I'd become complicit in his corruption. And maybe I had. Maybe I was worse than him, because I used his methods to destroy our competition while maintaining plausible deniability. But here's the twist that even I didn't see coming. 2 years after the Hartwell investigation, after our company had grown by 40% and I'd convinced myself I'd made the right choice, I received an envelope in the mail. No return address, postmarked from Chicago. Inside was a single photograph and a note. The photograph showed me leaving the FBI field office in Columbus. The note said, "Interesting how Hartwell's downfall benefited you so much. Perhaps we should discuss your anonymous tips. Call me." Someone had been watching. Someone knew what I'd done. The number led to a private investigator named Janet Crawford. When I called her, shaking with fear and adrenaline, she laid out the truth. Robert Hartwell had hired her 6 months before his arrest. He'd suspected industrial espionage, corporate sabotage, but couldn't prove it. So he'd had her investigate all his major competitors, including us. She'd discovered Marcus's embezzlement, our network of corruption, everything. But she'd also seen me meeting with FBI agents, had photographs of me passing documents, had recorded conversations between me and federal investigators. "Mr. Mitchell," she said in a voice that was both professional and threatening, "Mr. Hartwell is in prison, but he's still a wealthy man, a very angry, wealthy man who would be very interested to know who really destroyed his life." She wanted $500,000. Enough to disappear, to start over somewhere else. Otherwise, Hartwell would learn that his downfall hadn't been the result of a federal investigation, but a calculated attack by his business rival. "You have 1 week," she said before hanging up. I sat in my car outside the coffee shop where I'd taken the call, my hands shaking, my mind racing. This was justice, wasn't it? This was karma catching up with me for using Marcus's corruption to destroy an innocent, well, relatively innocent, competitor. But here's where the story takes its final turn. That night, I told Sarah everything. About Marcus's theft, about the corruption, about Hartwell, about the blackmail. I laid it all out, every sordid detail of what our comfortable life had really been built on. She listened without interruption, her face growing paler with each revelation. When I finished, she was quiet for a long time. "What are you going to do?" she finally asked. "I don't know. If I pay her, we're broke. If I don't, Hartwell might have me hurt or worse. And if I go to the police, I'm confessing to corporate espionage and probably going to prison myself." Sarah looked down at her pregnant belly. Our son was due in 3 months, and then back at me. "There's a fourth option," she said quietly. "What?" "We disappear." It wasn't a decision we made lightly. We had 3 days of the most intense, emotional conversations of our marriage. We talked about our parents, our friends, the life we'd built in Ohio. We talked about our employees, the families who depended on our company. We talked about justice, morality, and whether running away made us cowards or survivors. In the end, we chose survival. We liquidated everything we could quickly and quietly. Our house, our savings, our investments. We told everyone we were taking an extended baby moon before the birth, maybe traveling to Europe for a few months. Instead, we drove to Canada. We've been living in Vancouver for 3 years now. Our son Thomas is 2.5, and Sarah's pregnant again. I work for a small architectural firm under a slightly modified version of my real name. We rent a small apartment, drive a used car, and live paycheck to paycheck. But we're free. Marcus still runs the company as far as I know. I occasionally check the local news online, and Mitchell Brothers Construction seems to be doing well. No scandals, no investigations, no dramatic downfalls. Janet Crawford never made good on her threats. Maybe she decided the risk wasn't worth it, or maybe she found an easier target. I'll never know. Robert Hartwell got out of prison last year. Part of me wonders if he's still looking for the person who destroyed his life. Part of me doesn't want to know. But here's what I've learned from all of this, and why I'm telling you this story. Sometimes there are no good choices. Sometimes every option leads to someone getting hurt, someone losing something important, someone's life being destroyed. The question isn't whether you can avoid causing harm. It's whether you can live with the harm you choose to cause. I could have turned Marcus in and destroyed 23 families' livelihoods. I could have exposed the entire network of corruption and brought down half the construction industry in Ohio. I could have been the hero who chose justice over family, principle over profit. Instead, I chose my family. I chose my unborn son. I chose survival over justice, and I used other people's corruption to protect myself while destroying someone else's life in the process. Does that make me a bad person? I honestly don't know anymore. What I do know is that every choice has a price. Marcus paid his by losing his brother and living with the guilt of his actions. Hartwell paid his with 12 years in prison. Our employees paid theirs by losing the stability of ignorance. And I paid mine by giving up everything I'd ever known to protect the people I love most. 3 years later, I still don't know if I made the right choice. But I know I made the only choice I could live with. Sarah and I talk about going back sometimes. We wonder if enough time has passed, if the statute of limitations has run out on corporate espionage, if Hartwell has moved on with his life. But then I look at Thomas playing with his toys, completely innocent and unaware of the complicated world he was born into, and I think maybe this is enough. Maybe a quiet life in Vancouver, away from the corruption and betrayal and impossible choices, is exactly what we need. Maybe running away isn't always cowardice. Maybe sometimes it's wisdom. The funny thing is, I still miss Marcus. Despite everything he did, despite the lies and the theft and the corruption, he's still my brother. I still remember him teaching me how to read blueprints when I was 12. I still remember him giving me away at my wedding, tears streaming down his face as he told everyone how proud he was of his little brother. People aren't just one thing, are they? They're not just heroes or villains, honest or corrupt, family or strangers. They're complicated, contradictory, capable of both tremendous love and terrible betrayal, sometimes in the same day. Marcus stole from our family, but he also genuinely believed he was saving our company. He corrupted our business, but he also protected our employees' jobs. He lied to me for years, but he also covered for me when I made mistakes, supported me when I doubted myself, and celebrated my successes as if they were his own. Does that excuse what he did? Absolutely not. But it makes it harder to hate him completely. And maybe that's the real lesson here. Maybe the hardest part of growing up isn't learning to tell right from wrong. It's learning to live with the gray areas in between. I think about my son, growing up in a world where the news is full of corruption scandals, where trust seems naive and cynicism seems smart. I wonder what kind of choices he'll have to make, what kind of impossible situations he'll find himself in. I hope he'll be braver than I was. I hope he'll find a way to choose justice over survival, principle over pragmatism. But if he doesn't, if he finds himself in a situation where every choice leads to pain and every decision requires a sacrifice, I hope he'll forgive himself for being human. Because that's what this is really about, isn't it? Forgiveness. Not for the people who hurt us, but for ourselves when we hurt others. Not for the mistakes we make, but for the impossible choices we're forced to navigate. I may never know if I made the right decision, but I know I made a human decision, with incomplete information and competing loyalties and a heart that was trying to protect the people I love most. And maybe, in the end, that's all any of us can do. The last thing I'll say is this: if you're facing an impossible choice, If you're caught between loyalty and justice, between survival and principle, between family and morality, you're not alone. These situations are more common than we like to admit, and they're always harder than they look from the outside. Whatever you choose, whatever price you pay, whatever consequences you face, remember that you're human. You're doing your best with the information you have and the options available to you. That doesn't make every choice right, but it makes every choice understandable. And sometimes, understanding is the best we can hope for. If you've made it this far, if this story resonated with you or challenged you or made you think about your own impossible choices, I'd love to hear from you. Share your thoughts in the comments. Tell me about a time you had to choose between bad options, or just let me know if you think I made the right call. And if you want to hear more stories like this, real stories about real people facing impossible situations, hit that subscribe button.